Tamers and DigiDestined. It's Mike, aka Sanaku from Team Overground, and welcome to episode 7 of How I Became a DigiDestined. In this series, we talk to other content creators that came from other games, that have experience with other games, and talk about their transition to Digimon. So today in this episode, we're talking to Josh, aka JoDobbi, and we're talking about Keyforge.
Ooh, you have a deck. Let's go.
Told you I had props.
I know.
So, Josh, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, let people know a little bit about your channel.
Hello. My name is Josh, also known as JoDobbi, JoDobbi. I used to do a lot of Keyforge content, but I've slowly transitioned into Digimon because I grew up loving Digimon, playing the games, and watching the anime, and here we are. So, pretty much slowed down on the Keyforge front, and I'm loving Digimon so far. So, yeah, I got a YouTube account and a Twitch, so same names all the way, JoDobbi.
All right. So was Keyforge pretty much your first kind of step into the trading card game environment, or were you familiar with other card games? Or did you play other card games in the past?
Yeah, so when I was really young, I want to say like 11, 12 years old, I was playing Pokemon with my brother only, though. I never really went out to locals and stuff like that. And I played Yu-Gi-Oh! Somewhat, like when I was like 14. But I never really dove into the super duper competitive aspect of either of those games. So Keyforge, you could say, yes, is my first competitive card game that I've really dabbled in, and it's only been a year and a half or so since the game came out, so fairly new stuff.
So my roommates and I, we kind of picked it up when it first came out, and we played around with it. I think we bought over like 2 dozen decks,
Nice.
and we like you saw me kind of look around in a bag in the back cabinet here. In that bag, it's literally just all other card games, and there's a whole whack of Keyforge decks.
Yeah.
And what we would do is that when we were bored one day, we would just kind of put our hands in the bag, pull out 2 decks, see what we get, and we would just play with them.
Yep.
So for those unfamiliar with Keyforge, you don't buy booster packs in the traditional sense. You're actually buying entire decks.
Yes.
And all of these decks are pre-built and they're completely unique. So I'm not sure, is there like thousands of different combinations, or they're just in the hundreds?
It's almost infinite in terms
Yeah,
of
like
the
it's
uniqueness.
insane. Yeah.
Yeah. So Keyforge is to put it fairly specific, or simply, it's a unique card game. And how they market themselves as a unique card game is you have a card pool of X number of cards per set. So for example, the first set that you were holding maybe has around 250 cards, I want to say. And those 250 cards make up 36 of those 250 cards make up one Keyforge deck. So if you think about all the different iterations and different types of combinations you could get with 250 cards being all unique combinations, it's almost sky's the limit, right? Because you've got 36 different slots to put any of these cards in at any given time, which is why you buy a pack, and when you get this deck, it's uniquely yours, really. It even comes with its own scanner code where the deck is now under your own name, exactly. So what Sunaku's actually holding there is the Archon card. So in the Keyforge universe, Archons hold the power of different factions of the Keyforge universe. So he's holding a Shadows faction, this faction, and a Sanctum faction deck. So there were 7 original factions, and of these 7 factions, only 3 would be placed in a deck, 12 of each faction. So as you can see, that idea of uniqueness just goes even further with the introduction of these different factions, right?
Yeah, and as you can see here, I'm going to pull it up real quick. The backing of each deck is completely unique as well, showing those 3 factions specifically.
Yep.
And if I pull out another deck here, again, it's going to be 3. They might be like maybe 1 or 2 of the same, but it's always going to be 3 individual factions with a completely different card pool and deck.
Exactly.
And this checklist is going to be unique for every single deck that you pick up as well.
Exactly.
So as opposed to buying something like an actual like booster pack where you could get like 9 new cards or 13 or 14 new cards to add to your deck, this is your booster pack for all intents and purposes.
Yeah.
So my big question is that we played Keyforge more casually than anything else. Did you play Keyforge competitively, and what did that look like?
Yeah. So, my first competitive event was a grand championship, and a grand championship is the equivalent of a countrywide championship. So, a Canada-wide championship. It was held in Toronto, September of what is it now? I think 2015. No, no, not 2015. Whoa, that's way back. It was only 2 years ago.
Yeah, it's
What year is it?
still fairly new, yeah.
Yeah, it was only 2 years ago. So like yeah, September of 2 years ago. And what that looked like is the beauty about Keyforge is because the decks are unique, you also have unique formats. One of the important things that a pilot of a deck does is you have to not only decide which deck of your collection best fits a specific format, right? So of the
Mhm.
decks you play and love, um, one deck might do better in a survival format versus a Archon format. So Archon is basically any TCG. It's your main deck. It's a best of three of your main deck. But there are things like reversal, where when you sit in front of your opponent, they have to win with the deck you brought.
Oh,
So
okay.
reversal is you bring your trashiest deck to the tournament, so your opponent can't win with it, and you just try to win with theirs, right? So there's formats like reversal. There's formats like survival, where you have X number of decks and they represent your life points. So your first loss, that deck is eliminated. Then you go into your second deck, win as much as you can to make top cut. But if you lose with all three of your decks once throughout the tournament, you're out of the tournament. So there's different types of format, and deciding what to bring to a specific format is like probably one of the most important um, skills that you can have as a Keyforge player. Going
And
into
so
going into a competitive environment. Sorry, I just want to close that.
mhm. Well, and I was gonna say, because you say a bunch of different formats and basically like the meta and stuff.
Yeah.
Is is every single deck from this set, for example, known? Like, is every single deck publicly like revealed at this point? And if so, do you know as a player which kind of three faction you're hunting for at that point to kind of know which would be the best deck in any given format?
So let me tell you something right now. The Master Vault is what they call kind of like where all known Keyforge decks are held. So you can go on the
Okay.
Keyforge website and kind of just sift through them. Let me tell you that as of right now, there are at least 2 million opened Keyforge decks.
Oh my god. Okay.
Yes, and they keep
Yeah.
on coming. So set one alone, um, I think if you have a population size of that many decks, you're already able to kind of discern which combinations work best. There's also a lot of live play where you get to see which interactions between different factions work best or work worse. And there's specific cards in each faction that fit your playstyle. For example, the Shadows faction, one of my favorite factions, involves stealing and dealing damage and stealing. And sorry, I think we should dive into like how the game works a bit.
That was my next question.
Yeah,
After
yeah,
you
yeah.
answered this, I was gonna say let's kind of do a broad
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
overview of
yeah.
the game
But yeah,
itself. So.
yeah. Ultimately, yeah. After a while, it gets much easier. Like with the more decks that you open and play with, it gets much easier to kind of figure out, um, you know, where the meta stands.
So it's not necessarily a case of the best deck. It's a case of knowing the best factions and just kind of finding getting your hands on a deck that ends up kind of utilizing one or more of these factions.
Yeah. So the beauty about the factions stuff is they each have their own archetype and playstyle. So in
Mhm.
addition to knowing which factions are best, you have to know which factions are best for you. Because this is a game where the pilot is highly rewarded for their skill, not only in playing the game, but in deciding which deck they want to use at a tournament. So the decision making from the get go is already there in terms of like your skill and your ability to kind of like succeed in the game, basically.
Okay. So I'm going to circle back to that point in a
Sure,
little
yeah.
bit but for now, let's just kind of talk about the overview of the game in general.
Mhm.
So, compared to Digimon's pretty straightforward. You have your
Mhm.
5 security cards, you're just taking
Mhm.
them out and you're attacking your opponent for game. In Keyforge, the win condition is you need to forge, I believe it's 3 keys,
Mhm.
and that's done through acquiring a resource called amber throughout the course of the game.
Yes. Yes.
So talk a little bit about that and kind of how that plays and how kind of unique of a play style it actually is for a game's win condition.
So if you look at your typical like TCGs, you're going to be looking at certain amount of life points, right? No matter what it is, there's life points involved that you get to 0 in order to win a
Mhm,
game. In Keyforge, it's a race. You're not getting
mhm,
to 0, you're getting to 3. So what you're doing is you're not trying to take your opponent out. It's you're trying to win in light of your opponent slowing you down, right? So
mhm, yeah,
the game uh the game takes it a step further in a sense that your board state might not always necessarily be super important in the long run if you are just trying to get amber. So amber is the main resource when you forge keys. In the most basic level, you need three keys to win the game, and you need 6 amber to forge a key at the start of your next turn, right? You
mhm,
need to have at least 6.
yeah,
And how you get this amber is through playing cards, which have amber on them, or through utilizing your creatures to either capture amber or to reap. Now, reaping is, if you think about an RTS game where you send like a peon to like chop wood and it comes back and gives you like
mhm,
wood, reaping is just like that. You're tapping a
yeah,
monster or a creature and you gain a single amber or more based on its effects.
mhm,
Yeah. So that's ultimately how you get to win the game. Now, when you look at the different factions, each faction has different play styles. For example, the Logos faction is full of sciency, like high tech, different types of creatures and characters, and they reward hand size and hand management in the form of being able to draw and discard things over and over again. Um, and ultimately, the more you cycle through your deck, the more you're getting those cards that have natural amber on them to kind of get you to your win condition, right? When you look at a shadows kind of faction, these guys want to steal amber from your opponent's pool. So that's like a direct attack on your opponent's win condition, right? And then there's a lot of creatures that either capture amber, that grab amber from the common supply, which is where both players get amber to win the game, or they fight and they get rewarded for fighting.
mhm. So, just to draw a quick comparison between the factions and the colors of Digimon,
Of course.
because in Keyforge, every turn you declare a faction, and you can only play cards from that specific faction for the turn, right?
Yes, and that's where the game is like super unique because in
Mhm,
Digimon, as long as you have the memory to play a card, you can play the card, right? Um, Without putting it to your opponent's turn, right?
mhm,
Now, in Keyforge, the game inherently limits your decision making by having the specific restriction of, say you drew into 2 cards of each faction. You had a hand size of 6. You drew into 2 cards of each faction. At the start of your turn, you have to call one of those 3 factions, which means you can only play maximum 2 cards,
mhm.
right? So now you got to think like, what is the best way to gain an advantage playing 2 cards? Which of these 2 cards are the best cards to use at this point in time? That's kind of like the limit that you have in the game that really tests your hand management and your decision making. Yeah,
So, coming from a game that limits your decision making on a turn by turn, kind of case by case basis, did you feel that the memory gauge as a whole had kind of a similar balance to it? Because again, you have a handful of 5 or whatever, how many cards in your hand, but technically, depending on how much memory you have, you're still only limited to be playing that 1 or 2 cards per turn. So do you find that coming from Keyforge, where you kind of had that experience with that limited playability, that gave you a lot more insight on how to play your cards a bit more optimally over in Digimon?
Yep, 100%. So if we are limited by what we can play at any given time because of the different factions in Keyforge, in
Mhm,
Digimon we are limited by the memory gauge because our turn ends once it hits on the other once it gets to 1 on the opponent's side, right?
mhm.
So there's a mantra in Keyforge that we go by where it's literally just do as much as you can. So we resolve as much as you can. So it's helped and hurt me a little bit because
Yeah.
because in Keyforge I want to play things as much as I can and gain the biggest advantage before I pass it over to my opponent's turn. In Digimon, if you did that, you might give your opponent too much memory,
Yeah.
right? So it helps me in a sense that I make the most efficient use of my memory gauge, but if I overstep that and get too greedy, such as in Keyforge where you race to win, so you got to get a little bit greedy sometimes, um, that might actually punish me in the end. So yeah, there's definitely some overlap there.
Yeah. So I'm going to circle back to the original point you made a little while ago, where you said that in Keyforge, especially in competitive environments, it rewarded the pilot.
Yes.
And in Digimon, you are responsible for building your own deck with your own card pool. So
Yes.
in this case, Digimon rewards both the pilot and their deck building skill. So
Yes.
coming into a game where you actually were responsible for building your own deck as opposed to having one given to you,
hmm
did you feel that that was a challenge right out of the gate?
So yeah, right out of the gate, one of the things I struggled with the most are the ratios that I would need in order to have a functioning deck. So I
Hmm.
looked at a lot of people who have made these Digimon decks that are somewhat consistent, and I used their ratios. For example, 14 rookies, 11 champions, what have so on and so forth, right? Um, but the thing that I also brought with me from Keyforge is understanding uh, the card pool and interactions at a quicker rate than I want to say the average like TCG player. And the reason why is because when you're given a deck, there's another format called sealed, where you're given a deck and you play it at the tournament immediately. So
Yeah.
you're rewarded for having a good card knowledge and knowledge of the card pool. So I actually ended up doing my research on the Digimon card pool before building my deck, and I took advice and kind of I took what people were posting with regards to like their ratios and made the best deck that I could. So I one of the main skills that I took was being able to assess which Keyforge deck, in my opinion, is a viable competitive deck. So that decision making of discerning which combination of cards would be best suited for my playstyle helped me in building a Digimon deck.
Mhm. And we know kind of within your community that you're basically known as the purple guy. That's the big color that you kind of sat on.
Yeah.
That's the big representation that you hold. Is there a faction in Keyforge that purple reminded you of? And that's kind of what drew you to that color specifically? Or was it
Um,
just a case of these are my favorite Digimon?
it's a case of it's got my favorite Digimon, and purple is just naturally my favorite color. Like, it was my favorite color before I knew purple was gonna be a color. And the fact that
Mhm.
it had purple metal Garurumon and all the Devimon lines, which I was really into, had me sold from the get go. But a similar thing that I like in purple is that you cycle through your hand a little bit quickly, and you have a little bit more quickly than other houses or other sorry houses other colors.
Yeah.
It's overlap at time, um, and I love being able to. I like logos in a house in Keyforge, and you draw a lot, you
Yeah.
discard a lot in
I
logos.
was just gonna say that was my favorite too. So
Exactly,
yeah.
exactly. And just opening up your discard as almost an extension of your hand was huge in helping me really decide that purple was a color for me as well. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, that's fair. I found I equated logos a bit more to blue personally, just because that sheer like consistency
Mhm.
to it.
Mhm. That's
And
true.
that's what, yeah, and that's what kind of drew me to blue when I first kind of came into Digimon, was, especially coming from a very heavy
Yeah.
Yu-Gi-Oh background where, consistency is key, and you want to play as many draw cards as humanly possible to get into your big combo pieces and stuff like that. And well, purple does have that. You
Hmm.
kind of have to go through a couple more hoops to kind of get there in some
Hmm.
capacities.
No, that's
But
true. One
yeah.
thing I did want to say as well is Shadows in Keyforge is actually my favorite house, like, period, because it has a lot of thieves, a lot of rogues, a lot of like purple dark elves, which
Yeah.
which you can
Okay.
draw like
Yeah.
parallels to purple, right? And
Mhm.
and if purple removes Digimon, uh, Shadows removes Ember. So
Mhm.
if you
Okay.
can look at a Digimon board and think that for every one Digimon I take from my opponent's board, I have a Digimon to replace it with. In Keyforge, it's like for every Ember that I steal from my opponent, that goes directly into my pool. So the parallel is there in terms of win condition. So yeah.
Well, you can actually take it one step further, because purple as a color and kind of as an archetype doesn't play generally the same as any other color in the Digimon card game, because
Yes.
their win condition and their kind of way to advance their board state is reactive
Yeah.
as opposed to being proactive.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's another kind of cool parallel that you can draw as to why you ended up picking that color specifically,
Yeah.
because you're not play again. Purple doesn't necessarily play as against your opponent. It actually almost plays as if you're racing your opponent too, because you're racing your opponent in terms of you're racing to keep them off of their resources.
Yep. Exactly.
As, yeah.
Yeah, that's actually very well put. Like one of the things I wanted to kind of like to expound on that. Um, well, first of all, yeah, so true, right? Like
Mhm.
the Shadows house was for me because I liked being able to punish my opponent for overstepping with their resources. Because Shadows is the only house in Keyforge, and up until like recently, that could steal a lot of amber and just keep stealing from your opponent, right? So in the
Mhm.
same way that purple is currently one of the only houses with the most removal in the game, where if you overstep and drop, uh, like if you overcommit to a single Digimon line, you could be very punished by being like having that Digimon line removed and having zero board.
Yeah, and you have so many ways to do that, like through Trump Sword, Devimon,
Exactly. Yep. Heat
you know,
Viper, all that stuff. Yeah.
yeah, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, so that's actually a fun little parallel that I kind of clicked as we were
Yeah.
talking about that.
So
Hey,
true.
wait a
Yep.
second.
I agree.
Yeah, that's really neat. So when it comes to, I'm just going to kind of circle back to
Of
the
course.
competitive aspect as well. Uh, was there ever a moment in Keyforge, because now in Digimon we're kind of seeing the first instance of our limited list.
Hmm.
Was there any time in Keyforge where a deck was considered, too powerful, that, or a house or any certain combination was kind of considered too powerful? Or was the game kind of inherently balanced just through its own design?
So the beauty about Keyforge is no matter what set comes out, the the vision was you could play a set 1 deck against a set 6 deck and still have a fun
Mhm.
time.
Okay, yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at. Is
Yeah.
is there power creep, basically?
Yes. So there is a slight power creep. There's also the introduction of new mechanics, but the only thing we've ever seen is an errata for specific cards.
I see. Okay, so
Yeah.
they have introduced erratas
Yeah,
though. That's interesting. Okay.
they don't actually ban decks. There's no such thing as banning decks. There's no such thing as banning cards. It all just really falls down to making an errata for the card. So for example, there was one card that in my opinion was super broken. It's a Shadows card and all it says is if your opponent has more amber than you, steal 1 amber. And then while your opponent has more amber than you, repeat the process.
Oh.
So for example, if I had 0 amber and you
Hmm.
had 10, I'd effectively steal like 5.
Because at that point you would have more. Okay.
Yeah, cuz at that
I
point
see.
like
Yeah.
yeah, at that point like the scale would tip and I would eventually have
Yeah.
more.
Yeah.
So you could see how poorly designed that card could
Mhm.
be when you're looking at a game that you should be rewarded for going up in Ember, and then you have this one card that as soon as you drop it, you're punished for trying to win the game, like
Mm.
severely.
Yeah,
N-
I can see that being an issue. Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So
But they
that's yeah. Go ahead.
I was just saying, so, but they never actually touched it. It's just one of those realities you just kind of have to respect it, I guess, in some capacities.
Oh no. So they errated that card.
Oh, that's one of them that got around it. Okay.
Yeah. So instead of just stealing Ember until you have more, they put it to a maximum of 2.
Okay,
Yeah.
that
So
works.
basically, you can repeat the process. I think 2 more times, and if you still have more, you can't trigger it anymore. That kind of thing.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So now I want to talk about basically what got you interested in the whole content creation game. Were you a YouTuber first, then a streamer, or a streamer first, then a YouTuber, or what kind of sparked that in the back of your head to say I want to talk about Keyforge? Because I've looked at your past videos and it looks like you're talking about Keyforge decks and unboxing Keyforge decks and doing reviews for decks like that in the past. So what was kind of the thing that kind of got you on the stepping stone of wanting to do that on a content creation basis?
Well, yeah. So one of the things that Keyforge is chock full of content because of all the unique decks that you can open, right? And I thought that it would help me in my evaluating skills as a Keyforge player if I would unbox it, make a video out of it, and evaluate the decks to put up on YouTube, right?
Mhm.
And that way I could get comments from people whether my evaluation was sound or not. Some of the things that I missed that I should probably pick up on because it brings out the best of the deck, the worst of the deck, etc. Plus, I also wanted an excuse to unbox more decks.
So you're wanting to do content kind of came from more of a side of wanting to learn more.
Yeah, more like wanting to
So
be a
yeah.
better player. And then if people were into just looking for gameplay, looking for someone evaluating decks a
Mhm.
specific way, then here we are.
And when you transitioned to doing Digimon content, was that also in the case of I want to be educated or do I want to be the educator?
So it's kind of like a give and take for me as a content creator. I tell people this all the time on my Twitch, where like it's a very chill stream. Like if you actually hit up the chat, the one of the main messages is like backseat gaming is allowed. So you can basically tell me when I'm misplaying, or if there was a better play that I could have done, and then I kind of review that and be like, okay, that's cool. But for the most part, I think people have really resonated with the plays that I make as a purple player and the different
Mhm.
interactions that I really enjoy. Especially with Metal Garurumon in purple. Like that's my favorite interaction.
So you're using your platform as a way to kind of I guess as a whole, the community is kind of helping you become a better player.
Yes, and by the same token, um,
You
I
you can
bring
share that knowledge. Yeah.
yeah, and I can bring things out in myself that people um would look at and be like, "That was a really good play." Like for example,
Mhm.
like I figured out that Dimension Scissor on Puppetmon can actually gain me 6 memory in order to Puppetmon
Yeah.
again and put my opponent to 5, you know? So it's these different things that I do on stream that people really enjoy as much as I really enjoy what they tell me and how they critique my gameplay.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I can appreciate that, yeah, because that's kind of the similar boat where we came from, where we started our channel with these are the first decks we've built.
Yeah.
What do you think? Right. And like it's like, give it to us. We can take it. Like be
Yeah.
as harsh as you want,
Yeah.
because I need to learn. I want to learn, right? And
Exactly.
like and the same thing with our gameplay videos. I always say, like, during each gameplay at the end, I'm just like, if you notice something that could have been better, or like if you got a glimpse of our hands, or if you see something that could have been changed, let us know. Because I'm also of that kind of strong opinion that the community makes us better. Because sure, we're kind of the faces of the game, but we're not the end all be all. We don't know everything, and we're learning every day just as much as everybody else is.
Yeah, the way I see it, it's like there's a lot of good players out there. I just happen to have access to a camera and a mic.
Mhm.
And a good computer. Like that's literally that's literally how I see myself as a content creator. I just happen to have access to tools that allow me to create content. I don't necessarily like put myself up in this like tier of Digimon player. I find myself a good player, but I mean that's not the focus of my that's not like why I make content.
That's fair.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about Digimon specifically, and your kind of experience with the franchise leading up to the launch of this card game.
hmm
So,
Uh
oh, go ahead.
no, go, please. I need like a starter.
No, I was just gonna say, like, people familiar with my content who watch me, they know that I've pretty much been with Digimon since I was 9 years old. That was 21 years ago now. So it's like it's been my favorite franchise. I love the whole partner dynamic. All of the children throughout all the generations have been like my favorite characters. Digimon as a whole, it's meant so much to me. And the big draw for Digimon for me is especially through the whole crest system and how emotions are the thing that make you powerful,
hmm
and that's kind of the thing that gives you your strength, and that it's okay to feel the things that you feel and to tap into those emotions to bring out kind of the best potential of you that you have. And the series has kind of carried that through in different iterations. So but I love the whole like dynamic of this is my partner, this is my best friend, I will bring out the best in him and they'll bring out the best in me. And in this weird kind of way, like I've kind of carried that through in my own personal relationships too, because it's just like, I'll tap my buddy on the head and be like, "You're my Agumon. I love you." And,
Yeah. Oh.
but but yeah, so like Digimon has meant a lot to me, and it's been one of my favorite franchises throughout pretty much the majority of my life. And trading card games has also been like the biggest favorite pastime of mine that I have. Whenever a new game comes out, I have to try it. Like, hence, case in point, Keyforge came out. We saw it on a display just somewhere in a game shop. We're like, what the heck is that? That looks
Yeah.
cool. And then 12 decks later, here we are. So every time I see a new starter deck for something, I got to try it out and I got to take it home and we play it and I see if I like it. And if I like it enough, I jump into a competitive atmosphere. So the thing with Digimon is that I was already hooked. I didn't have to try it out. I already knew it's Digimon, it's card games. I was going to be in it no matter what. So my question to you is mostly, what did Digimon mean to you? And did jumping to this card game come kind of from that same excitement and love that I have on my end? Or was it kind of a mix of just kind of falling into it like a couple other content creators have as well?
So, I actually really like the Digimon franchise, but I didn't grow up with it in the same way that most people have, which is like through the anime.
Mhm.
And kind of like through that side of things. I watched the first season and was really into it, but it was kind of in the same time as Pokemon, and at that time I was like super into Pokemon, and I kind of didn't get to appreciate Digimon for what it really was. And then I got Digimon World 1 on PlayStation 1, and that changed my life as far as Digimon's concerned, because I love the idea of taking care of your Digimon partner. I love raising Mons and kind of like taming Mons. And I love the whole aspect of just being able to have this team of Digimon that you kind of like grow with and digivolve into things based on specific parameters. I love that stuff, like raising and bringing out the best in your partner Digimon and stuff in order to really succeed. So I ended up playing Digimon World 1, Digimon World 2, Digimon World 3, and then I got into the Cyber Sleuth and Hackers Memory franchises, or like the games. And yeah, I haven't looked back since. I've actually played Digimon World 1 like so many different times, like over and over again, just so
Mhm.
I could like try to unlock like the different types of Digimon. And to me, it was always a surprise because one of the things I like about Digimon is like when you raise a Digimon, their evolution is not linear,
Yeah, yeah.
right? It's based off their mood, parameters, time of day, how you raise them ultimately. Sometimes it's even what you feed them and like what weight they end up at. That gets you to the Digimon that you want. And to me, I don't actually have like I know I love Metal Garurumon, like he's my favorite Digimon, but when I actually dive into these types of games, I literally like don't really care what my Digimon becomes. Like I don't Google
Yeah.
like stats and stuff. Like Digimon you turn out to be is a Digimon that I'm gonna end up really liking anyway, regardless, because I took the effort to raise you and become whatever it is you become, right? So yeah, it feels like having a kid. Oh my god. but
Well, no,
but
it's a microcosm for life in general because
yeah,
like we can
exactly.
all turn out to be different ways, but it all
Yeah,
depends on like our environment, our conditions,
yeah,
what we're taught, what
yeah.
our
No,
weight is. Who knows?
yeah,
But
exactly. And I love that stuff, which is how I
mm,
got into it. And as far as card games were concerned, um I wasn't really too into card games. Like I wanted to get into TCGs, but Magic was way too expensive. Pokemon was too defined for me, and I didn't like that Pokemon was like super searchy. Yu-Gi-Oh got crazy complicated, and it just wasn't for me. And Keyforge came out, so I figured I'd try Keyforge. And then Digimon was announced, and I heard really good things about it. And long story short, like I didn't need to play the game to pre-order boxes. Like I just wanted
mm,
to get the cards to collect initially,
yeah.
but the game was like amazing, so I just got the game.
And it's funny you say that because I find like there's always like two camps for kind of Digimon inclusivity, and that's either I came from the video games and then I kind of grew up and or not grew up, but kind of grew into the anime, or
hmm
I came from the anime and I grew into the video game.
Yeah.
And it's funny because you're like the video game equivalent of this microcosm, and I'm the anime equivalent, and we've kind of intersected at this point now.
Yeah.
But the card game is really cool because it kind of takes the best aspect of both of those kind of channels of fan inclusivity. Because in the card game, they did a great job of introducing like all of the fan favorites right out of the gate. So if you had a favorite, you could jump in, you could be like, I'm going to build a deck around my favorite, like Metal
hmm
Gurumon, for example, because he's such a strong presence in the anime.
hmm
But on top of that, if you're a Digimon World fan, you look at your deck building and you can go, okay, I'm going to digivolve you into whatever the hell I want based on how I've built my deck.
hmm
And that from that point, you can then again turn into anything else I want. And then from that point, you can turn into anything else I want. And it's the evolution mechanic as a whole of being able to kind of evolve into anybody. It's a very cool kind of like deep cut lore
hmm
from I guess the video game side of things specifically. And I really appreciate that fact because you're raising your Digimon in a sense the exact way that you want it to.
Yeah.
But unlike video games, you have total control over how you build your Digimon, with inheritable effects and with, and stuff like that. So, for coming from the video game specifically, was that an aspect of the card game that you felt was kind of, I guess, further impacted your love for the game?
Yeah, definitely. Because it's another thing is the fact that they pay a lot of homage to the video games in their art.
Absolutely, yeah.
Like the art is so good. Like there are times where I will play this card over this card just because this art was from Digimon World 1. And most of
Mhm.
the time they have the same stats anyway, so why not? But as far as the mechanics of the game and raising that Digimon, it's very like the parallels are very strong, right? Like you could consider the cost to Evo and the inheritables a result of how you raise the Digimon in the video game, right?
Mhm. Exactly, yeah.
So that's ultimately how you build your stack. How you build your stack and raise your Digimon is the same way how you build your stack and raise your Digimon in the games, with the exception that you don't have to feed or send them to the washroom.
So tying that back to Keyforge, we talked a little bit about how some mechanics from Keyforge we can kind of see in Digimon, and those are some of the decks that you were drawn towards. Are there any mechanics from Digimon that you might like to see in Keyforge that might actually make that game a bit more interesting?
Hmm. Um. See, that's interesting. Maybe one of the things that I think would make Keyforge interesting is so in Digimon there's a raising area, right?
Mhm,
So it's basically like a standby phase for a specific Digimon.
mhm,
So if Keyforge had like a bench phase where you'd have like your unit just sitting ready for launch for next turn, I think that would add another layer to the game that would make players force players into planning even further ahead in the game. Because in Keyforge you don't deck out. You cycle your deck.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so if you run out of cards, you just reshuffle your discard pile and continue to play. The idea is to get to the three keys. So I think having that bench not only allows you to cycle through your deck quicker in Keyforge, but it also forces your opponent to see a threat there that's like waiting to come out. So I like that aspect.
Mhm. And is there any other mechanics from Keyforge that you might want to see in Digimon specifically?
Ooh, that's cool. Um, Man, that's a tough one. Okay, so in let's see. Honestly, a really cool parallel that I just noticed from you saying that is Digisorption.
Yeah, yeah,
When you do Digisorption, you have to tap your Digimon, right?
yeah.
And as a result, you kind of gain memory by,
Mhm.
being able to digivolve for less. In the same
Mhm.
way that when you tap your Keyforge creatures, you gain Amber.
You reap. Yeah,
Yeah, so
yeah,
it's a really
yeah.
cool like
Yeah.
parallel. So I think another thing that I would like to see from Keyforge to Digimon. Ooh, that is very tough. That's actually really, really tough. I think being able to manipulate a specific board state. So for example, like in Keyforge, there is a card that acts as a field card. It's like artifacts are like field cards. Like you know how in
Mhm.
Yu-Gi-Oh you have like Umi or whatever, like the water field.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Field
So
spells.
yeah, so
Yeah.
artifacts are basically just magic cards, but some magic cards have consistent effects on
Mhm.
your Digimon. So something like that I think would be pretty cool. It already exists in the form of tamers, but I want to see something that's like based on the environment that they're in. I think that would be cool
Yeah, you know what?
because yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, I love that you say that because when I had my talk with Connor, Memory Gauge podcast about
Yeah,
Magic, that's literally because he asked me what would be one thing that I would want to see in Digimon from Magic, and I said I because Magic has literal artifacts
yeah,
that you put them into play and they just stay there, and they're items that you can kind of use passively throughout the
yeah,
course of the game.
yeah,
And I'm like, it'd be awesome if I could be like, I'll play this Digivice item card, right, and then
yeah,
that gives me like a boost or something or some sort, kind of like Tamers, but not necessarily Tamers. But
yeah,
we were talking about the idea of like a field spell that affects both players. So it's
yeah.
funny you mentioned that too. So that's the second time a player has kind of made that kind
Oh
of
my
wish
gosh.
list, I guess.
Now I know. Okay, I can definitively say what I want in Digimon. That could be a
Mhm,
cool thing. Okay, so in Keyforge, there are cards that are upgrade cards.
mhm.
So these upgrade cards, you put them on your creature as part of the stack, and they basically yeah,
Oh, okay. Yeah,
they beef up the card or they reward it even further for something it does. So I think a really cool um kind of like type of card that you can put into Digimon is like upgrades. Like you know how
like
like Metal Greymon in the current anime has like Trident Arm, which is like a new move.
Alteris mode, yeah.
Yeah, Alteris mode. Like those extra side evolutions that they have are a result of like different modifications that they have, right? So instead of a completely new Digimon card that could be a slide evolution, you could get something like an upgrade that would allow you to upgrade not only for example, the Weregurumon Sagittarius mode, but that upgrade could go to different types of Digimon.
Well, as of this recording, we do have some spoilers for BT5 where you can actually evolve. There is an Alteris mode and a Sagittarius mode card
Yeah,
that they either evolve from a champion for 3 or they can evolve from another ultimate for 1. But I like where you're going with this, where you can actually say it's actually like an equip card instead, where
yes, an equip
it's
card.
almost like it's almost like it's an inheritable like without being a Digimon
Yeah,
that you can just kind of put into the stack to kind of get that bonus.
yeah, and I think one of the cool things, and I think another layer of that would be like, in order for you to even use it, you'd have to have a tamer on the board, because
Yeah.
tamers and their Digivice allow themselves to like modify the Digimon and evolve a specific way, right, from what they would
Mhm.
normally would be. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, I like that. I like the idea of either some sort of equip that kind of again like generates you some sort of bonus,
Hmm.
or some sort of like field spell esque thing that has either a benefit to one player or both players,
Yeah,
or that can impact both players to some capacity. I feel like that's a really cool idea for the game that I
Hmm.
feel wouldn't be so far fetched in terms of what we could potentially see from future card design.
Yeah, because you also have like Digimon that like get armor and different weapons and stuff like that. Like sky's the limit. In Digimon World 3, that was the first time I've ever had to equip a Patamon with like a magic wizard staff. And I was like, what? What the heck? Like that's the first time I've ever had to give Guilmon a buckler, like a shield. So I was like, I didn't know this was a thing. Like, and I was like, that's cool.
All right. Well, I think we've pretty much covered everything today. So, did you have any questions for me?
No, man, it's pretty good. Like everything's pretty good. I guess when are you gonna start streaming?
Either when I get a new computer,
Boom.
or if I can figure out how to get the current computers I have to actually, function with better
Fair
parts.
enough. Yeah,
But
yeah.
either way, it's in the works. But it's still a bit of a ways away. There's still a lot of moving parts I kind of got to account for,
Well, no problem.
unfortunately.
It'll be
But
exciting when you do.
yeah. So yeah, I think we've covered everything here. So yeah, thanks for watching, everybody. This has been episode 7 of How We Became a DigiDestined, where we talked to JoDobbi and his migration and travels from Keyforge to the Digimon card game. So, if you have any questions for him, anything extra that we haven't discussed in this video, feel free to leave a comment, and we will get back to you as soon as we can. And if you like what we do here at the Overground, feel free to like and subscribe to the channel if you so choose. And we're hoping to hit 300 subscribers by the end of February. I'm not quite sure when this video is going to go up, but we're almost there. And your support would be greatly appreciated. And don't forget to support JoDobbi. So, Josh, do you want to go ahead and plug your channel too while you're at it?
Sure. Yeah, guys, check out Overground. He's got a lot of cool stuff. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm on YouTube and Twitch. JoDobbi, JoDobbi. You'll kind of see an avatar with some cards or some Digimon both ways. So that's probably me. But yeah.
Yeah, and I'll leave links to all of Josh's stuff, his Twitch, his YouTube, all that jazz.
Awesome,
Even his
awesome.
maybe his Discord link if he'll allow it. Uh,
No, no, that's yeah. I mean, stop by the stream. Hit me a subscribe on YouTube, and then we'll take it from there. The Discord, I'm kind of like slowly getting people in,
mm,
because that's like a community that I'm trying to build. So you know, hop in on a couple streams, and if you like what you see, you'll end up on the Discord kind of thing.
Sounds good. Yeah, well,
Yeah.
everything will be in the description below.
Thank
So
you.
have a good one, guys. We'll see you later.
Take care. Bye bye.